Ask you again. It's a simple question. Some people can answer it straight away, including pro-Palestinians people I've had on my program. Many are very quick to say absolutely. Do you believe Hamas are a terror organization?
And that's a very interesting question, but I think you're peddling asininities.
Well, just answer the question.
Can somebody do me a favor? Google asininities and find out if it's a word.
I know what it means.
If it's not, make sure it's added to Webster on Top G's orders.
Okay. Just, are they a terror group?
You're peddling asininities because I'll tell you why, Piers. Let me answer the question.
No, I'm not.
Of course you are.
It's a simple question.
That's like me asking.
I'll tell you why I asked. Because the UK, where you were born, prescribes Hamas as a terror
They
organization.
also prescribe me as dangerous to children in schools. Let me explain something to you, Piers.
You're not prescribed as that.
If I were to sit here and say, is stealing wrong? And you'd say yes, and I go, but what if the person stealing is trying to feed their family, and if they don't, their family are going to die? Is it still wrong? You're trying to take a very nuanced and complicated argument and reduce it down to one sentence, which is failure.
You're trying to equate stealing with a mob of terrorists breaking over a border, going to peaceful...
Is that what Israel did?
Wait a minute.
A mob of terrorists breaking over a border and killing people. Is that what Israel did?
Going through a border on October the 7th.
Oh, October the 7th.
Massacring young people at a festival, massacring families in their homes in a kibbutz, setting fire to them, cutting their heads off, killing babies.
Oh, killing 40 babies, that was true.
Well, fine.
Were the babies vaccinated?
Why are you being flippant?
I'm not being flippant. The point I am making...
I don't find that funny.
No, but the point I am making is that the media lies, firstly. Secondly...
I can ask you about different things at the same time, right?
Sure.
So I'm asking you, first of all, specifically, what is your reaction to what happened on October the 7th?
Sure. I'll answer the question professionally. I do not condone the loss of human life on either side. I think anybody doing anything which directly damages civilians is disgusting and abhorrent. However, I would be an amateur if I could not sit and pretend I do not understand the motivations behind either side. This is not even me taking a side. I understand why Israel is doing what it's doing. I understand why Palestine is doing what it's doing. However, I still call the Israeli actions absolutely abhorrent and genocidal.
Okay, we're going to come to Israel's actions, I promise you. We will ask that question specifically. But in terms of what Hamas did on October the 7th, do you accept that was an act of terrorism?
It's an interesting question because
once again... It's not really.
It is.
No, it's a very straightforward question.
Because you're the person who would have called Nelson Mandela a terrorist while he was still in jail, and one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
I wouldn't have called him that. For me to answer
the question... Yes, you would have. For me to answer the question, I have to be very professional, Piers. For me to sit on the outside in Romania with no personal involvement in Israel-Palestine, it's easy for me to say, yes, it was an act of terror. However, if I was in Gaza, if I was in an open-air prison, if my family had been annihilated by bombs from the sky, if everybody I knew had suffered the loss of a loved one, if I had no chance of any kind of freedom or democracy or standard of life, would I believe it was an act of terror, or would I believe it's an act of resistance against oppression? You have to be very careful how you answer these questions.
So what do you think?
I think I understand what happens when you take people and put them in such an inhumane condition. For anybody to sit and say that you're going to take people and put them in absolutely inhumane conditions and give them no standard of life, and they're not allowed to ever fight back, or they are terrorists.
But I can agree with you.
Anyone who does that is an amateur.
I can agree with you that the plight of the Palestinians for many decades has been absolutely shameful.
So what did we think was going to happen, Piers?
No, nothing justifies what happened on October the 7th.
So what are they supposed to do?
Nothing.
So what are they supposed to do?
That was an act of medieval barbaric terrorism. Nothing justifies it.
Did they suffer acts of medieval... Did they suffer acts of medieval barbaric terrorism before that date? Yes. And it's unfortunately an eye for an eye in this world. I'm not condoning. I'm being a professional and answering to you why it happened.
Give me one example of where Israel, without any provocation, went into... a specific question. Went into Gaza and massacred 1,500 innocent people, cutting their heads off, taping and boasting about what they'd done back to their families in Israel, kidnapping Holocaust survivors, they wouldn't, of course, done that in their case, kidnapping old grandmothers and bringing them back to Israel, kidnapping babies, kidnapping children. When has Israel actually gone in and done something of the scale of October the 7th?
There's literally endless examples of that.
That is to say, I'm very reluctant to condemn people who are in a position or in a condition such that were I in that position or condition, I'm not sure what I would do. Now, the 1,500 young men who burst the gates of Gaza, they were born into a concentration camp. They lived for 2 decades in a concentration camp. They had no past, they had no present, they had no future, they had no jobs. Half of them, according to humanitarian organizations, suffered from what's called severe food insecurity. And then on top of that, as I'm sure you know, Piers, because you keep up with the news. Periodically, Israel goes into Gaza and it mows the lawn. And you know what mows the lawn means. It means a high-tech massacre in Gaza. In 2008-9, Operation Cast Lead. 2012, Operation Pillar of Defense. 2014, Operation Protective Edge. And in each of these high-tech massacres visited on the people of Gaza, in some cases hundreds, in some cases thousands of Palestinians are killed.
Okay, give me one.
In 2014, they were bombing civilians.
No.
You know what, Piers? Let me tell you something.
I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about what they would
Let
categorise as retaliation for rocket strikes, and there's an arguable point. As there is, for example, I'm vehemently against the expansion of the settlements on the West Bank. I think there are legitimate questions about the proportionality of Israel's response here.
Yeah,
but in
questions.
terms of what Hamas perpetrated on October the 7th, there is no instance of Israel doing that to the people of Gaza. And you have to accept that. No. If you don't accept that, you're either deluded or you're deliberately not wanting to say the obvious, which is that was an act of terrorism, because you're concerned about upsetting people in Palestine. Is that the case?
Let me go back to my first point when I said you're peddling asininities. The reason I said that is because to look at a situation, no matter how heinous, and to ignore all of the context and pretend that you do not understand why said situation happened. Piers, don't interrupt this, it's 2 sentences. I want all people to stop dying. However, I understand what is going to happen when you create a pressure cooker. That is my answer, and it's extremely professional. I don't want anyone to die, and because I don't want anyone to die, because I'm a peacemaker, because I'm a humanist, I understand you cannot lock people in an open-air prison for an undetermined period of time without provoking terrorism.
So out of interest, what would you have done if you'd been Israel after October the 7th?
That's a really interesting question, and I think there's people who are more qualified than me to answer.
Given that Hamas last week said, we're going to try and do the same thing again and again and again, what would you do to defend the people of Israel?
Good question. They have the Iron Dome, which is largely effective. I think that their border security is usually effective. It's very interesting that it wasn't on.
So you would say they would do nothing other than tighten up security?
I think if I was truthfully, I'll answer the question. If I was truthfully in charge of Israel, I would have found out how our border was penetrated. I would have made sure that was impossible to do. I would have had large conversations and discourse during that period, which would probably take weeks to ensure that my border was impenetrable because we were at no genuine threat of a repeat attack. And then I would make it clear that there will be some repercussion unless there would be some repercussion unless we can come to peace terms. I don't think the
Hamas doesn't want peace.
Of course not. But I'm saying
that's their stated position.
Of course.
So does it mean
okay,
peace
you're asking what I do. I would have found out. First things first. I'm a man. So first things first, you fix the problem. Okay. Our border's been penetrated. How do we make sure that doesn't happen again?
Sure,
How did it happen? Internal investigation. Let's make sure the border's secure. Now our civilians are safe. Our civilians are safe, which buys us time. Let's have a conversation and see if we can actually reason with Hamas. If we can't, then there might be some military intervention. But there certainly wouldn't be bombing hospitals, cruise missiling refugee camps. There wouldn't be any of the things that's going on now. Absolutely.
You wouldn't try and attack the people.
No, because this is a rushed and emotional response. And that's what I would have prevented. I would have made sure as a man I didn't make a rushed and emotional response.
So you'd be more like Neville Chamberlain, trying to do peace with the Nazis, and Winston Churchill trying to kill them.
Well,
yeah,
that's an interesting question.
You're an appeaser, not a warrior.
Well, I still think I'm a warrior, but I think that when you're a warrior, you have to be very capable and...
No, that's what Neville Chamberlain's view was. We should do peace with the Nazis.
You have to be very understanding of your power, and you have to use it responsibly. And just like I said earlier, when I'm trying to be responsible about what I say to the young men of the world, I would understand as Israel, I must be responsible with my massive military might to make sure I don't kill civilians. And I would sit and try and make a measured response, and I'd be a professional, and I would consider them human beings, and I would secure my border, and try and come up with a plan better than, oh no, I'm mad, I'm emotional now, let's go kill everyone. I think that's the wrong response. Correct. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
Are they a terror group or not?
They're one team's freedom fighter, and they're deemed a terrorist
What do
group.
you think?
I think that if you lock people in an open-air prison and steal their land, they're going to retaliate.
So they're not a terror group?
I think they're going to retaliate.
They're not a terror group?
One team's terrorist is another
team's freedom fighter. Okay, we're now up to about 8. Are they a terror group?
And also, another thing I want to make clear to you, Piers.
Only Jeremy Corbyn has done this.
Done what?
Refused to answer the question.
I think that what they are doing is seemingly deemed an act of terror by the people that the terror...
Don't use weaselly words.
They're not weaselly. Of course the Israelis think they're a terror group, and of course the Palestinians think they're freedom fighters. It's stupid that you're asking the question.
Most of the civilized world thinks they're a terror group who committed an act of terrorism. It's not difficult. What they did was an act of terrorism.
And I think that if Israel continues to conduct acts of terrorism on the Palestinian people, they're going to do nothing but strengthen the reaction.
That's a different conversation I'm about to have with you about Israel's response. But before I get there, one more time, is Hamas a terror group who committed an act of terrorism?
I think that when you lock people in an open-air prison, you're going to have to expect retaliation.
No,
because I have to... There's people who are... First things I want to say, Piers.
If you don't mind me saying, I think it's spineless.
Sure.
I do.
That's fine.
You sound like Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, that is an insult.
Did you see my interview with him?
No.
Right. 15 times last week, I asked him the same question. 15 times he prevaricated and wouldn't answer. Eventually, when someone does that enough times, you know what they really think.
Okay.
You don't think they're a terror group.
Well, let me answer.
You don't think they're a terror group.
No, what I think is this. On certain
Because I'd be
scenarios.
really curious what you think an act of terror is if it's not massacring 1,500 innocent people,
It's not
including Holocaust survivors,
Piers.
kidnapping babies,
Piers.
decapitating
Piers.
people, cutting their limbs
Piers.
off, raping women.
Yeah, talk about missing limbs. We're going to talk about that when we talk about what
We
Israel
are,
has done.
but
So
when we
let's-
get there, it'll be in the context of you not admitting that was an act of terror.
Well, let me answer the question for the final time. I am a realist. And as a realist, sometimes you do not come to the conclusion of labeling good guys and bad guys. The world is not black and white.
Hamas are bad guys.
No, the world is not black and white. The world is actually very gray. Anybody who sits and thinks there's
Nothing
clearly a
grey
good
about
guy,
what- there's
and
nothing
clearly
grey
a
about
good
what
guy
Hamas
and
did.
clearly a bad guy does not understand how the world works. And as a realist, what you do is you look at scenarios and you understand why they happen, how unfortunate they are, how unfortunate the loss of human life is, how civilians die on both sides, how innocents are dying in a chess game played by the elites on both sides. Both sides, you have innocent people who didn't even vote for the person making the decisions, who are ensuring their death, signing their death warrants. It's unfortunate on both sides. But listen, sir, you would not advocate Russia doing any of the things to Ukraine that Israel is doing to Palestine. You would not sit
Russia
here.
has been doing exactly that.
Russia
to
has
Ukraine.
not done a fraction of the things to Ukraine that Israel has done to Palestine.
Russia illegally invaded a sovereign democratic country and has committed a barbaric rampage, trying to seize as much of Ukraine as it can, bombing maternity hospitals,
Let me ask you a
killing
question.
innocent women
Let me
and
ask you a
children.
question.
Right? Don't even try and have some kind of
No, this is genuine
equivocation
question.
of this.
I will. A Hamas rocket, a tiny Hamas rocket that can make a pothole in the road, and then they get hit back with cruise missiles. Let me ask you a question. Ukraine sent a drone and it hit the Kremlin. A drone attack. It did nothing. It damaged some shingles. If Russia decided to then respond with a missile attack on a hospital and annihilate 800 people,
It has been.
do you think that would be allowed?
That's exactly what it has been.
Would you advocate for
seen,
that?
Have you seen?
Would you support that
Have
reaction?
you seen the state of Mariupol, which they leveled to the ground?
The Ukrainians did level it.
The
You're correct.
No, the Russians.
2014.
The
Give it
Russians
the program.
leveled Mariupol.
And my question to you is, would you advocate those reactions? Let me ask you another question, Piers.
No,
This is a genuine
okay.
question. Let me ask you a question, because I want to understand your point
It's
of view.
actually my interview of you.
Yeah, but you tried to understand mine. I just want to understand your point of view. If I believed, or if Israel believed, that one of the people in your house was a terrorist and decided to destroy your entire house and kill your entire family, would you sit and say, well, maybe there was a terrorist inside, I accept that? Or would you be enraged? Genuine question.
I don't think you can take an individual person's response.
Well, it's a bunch of individual people in Gaza.
Yeah,
They're
sure.
people, individuals with
All right,
thoughts and
let's
dreams and aspirations
Fine.
which are being annihilated. 15-year-old girls without legs because
Fine.
of cruise missiles.
Let's come to
they
that.
are individual people. They're not cattle, Piers.
Let's come to
They're
that.
people.
Right, and so were the people in Israel on October the 7th.
And that's why it's so heinous, which is my exact point.
But not heinous enough to reach your bar of terrorism.
It's not about reaching bar of terrorism.
Let's move. No,
it's understanding why things happen.
By not saying Hamas embeds itself, 40,000 terrorists in my estimation. You can call them whatever you like. And they're embedded amongst the civilian population, predominantly in northern Gaza. We know from intelligence over the last 20 years, which you won't believe because the Matrix has made it all up.
Correct.
But we know from intelligence that historically Hamas likes to embed itself, particularly around things like schools and hospitals and mosques, because that makes it more difficult if the Israelis attack.
Yeah.
Now, Israel has killed nearly 12,000 people in its response, right? There are many people around the world demanding a ceasefire who think that is a ridiculously disproportionate response to what happened. Well, it was genocide. They would want to kill everyone in Palestine. They don't.
They just want to drive them all out.
Whereas Hamas do want to kill every Jew. That is actually what genocide is.
You know what's actually interesting? Because you've spoken about this subject with people who actually understand the conflict better than I do. Mohammed Hijab understands it better. Low-key understands it better. I'm talking from a very general humanistic perspective because I don't understand the absolute intricacies like they do.
Do you know what genocide means?
Of course I do.
Right. Genocide means you want to eradicate an entire people based on race or ethnicity. Israel clearly doesn't want to do that to the Palestinian people.
Clearly not.
If it did, it wouldn't tell a million of them, as it turned out, who moved south. Now, there are arguments about whether
to attack them as they moved.
Well, some people got hit as they moved.
Oh, some people got hit.
Yes.
Some people got hit.
You know what,
You know
Andrew?
what happens?
You know what, Andrew?
Wait till it's your son, son.
You know what?
Wait till it's your son.
I agree. And you know what, Andrew? War is horrific. It's horrific. The question is it a just war for Israel to go after Hamas? And if it is, and you believe as I do, Hamas has to be got rid of, how do you do that? If you don't do it the way Israel is doing it, how do you get rid of that terror group? Now, you won't agree with anything they're doing because you can't even categorize them as a terror group.
No, the reason I won't agree with them is because I'm a human, Piers. And please let me answer this without being interrupted. You didn't answer my earlier question for a reason, because you knew that you couldn't answer it without proving my point. The question about the fact that if they decided to cruise missile your house because they thought somebody inside was a terrorist, you would not accept the loss of your family that you have raised. You would not accept that.
Of course I wouldn't.
Okay, absolutely. So let me answer this as a professional. What's funny is I'm a humanist. Like I said,
a professional what, by the way?
The professional. Please let me answer. Let me answer.
What are you? What are you thinking? You say you're thinking the professional,
and I'm talking about this from a humanistic perspective, right? And like I said, you've talked to people more knowledgeable than me on the details of the subject.
Right.
Listen to me very carefully. I thought we lived in a democratic society. You just said 35,000 Hamas terrorists, and this is the thing that's most upsetting to me. This is what genuinely upsets me. Israel intelligence will say a guy's a Hamas terrorist. Has that guy gone to a court of law? Has there been a democratic process? Has he been proven to be a terrorist? No. They've just decided from their intelligence that couldn't see an invasion coming from hundreds of miles away. So this intelligence is
actually no.
It's not great.
No.
So they've decided this person might be in intelligence without court case, without any kind of democratic process, and because of that, they've decided to annihilate civilians along with him, and it's all just collateral damage, and nobody should care. That is not a humanistic perspective, and that is disgusting. And any person in the West who is advocating for that is a hypocrite. Because if it was turned on them, if the American government said, we think the person in your shopping mall, one of the people you were shopping alongside in the mall, might have committed a crime. We didn't take them to court. We think they might have, so we killed your whole family. Get over it.
So the last time
is a clown and a hypocrite.
So the last time,
what do you expect full-grown men to do?
I'm about to respond.
What do you expect full-grown men to do when you kill all of their families and leave them locked in an open-air prison?
Let me respond. The last time that Jewish people faced an existential threat was in World War II. And the Nazis, who wanted to take over the world and kill every Jewish person, the Nazis were ultimately defeated by Winston Churchill leading the Allies. And Winston Churchill, in the process of defeating the Nazis, killed a lot of German innocent civilians in the process. Do you think that was justified?
Let me ask a question.
Was it? Well, no, I asked the questions. Was it justified?
Sir, I believe, and let me just get this right in my head.
Yeah, think about it.
No, I don't need to think about your question. I believe that the Nazis, which were obviously heinous, I'm not advocating anything they did, it's disgusting, the Nazis. I'm glad we beat them. I'm actually a huge
Were they
fan.
terrorists?
Yeah, they were.
Right.
So I believe that they were...
So when you massacre Jewish people, you're terrorists? When you do it in Israel?
When you try and conduct genocide on a populace because you don't want them on land you say is yours, then you are terrorists.
It's exactly what Hamas did on October the 7th.
Exactly what Israel had did before that.
So you've literally just described what Hamas do.
You just described what Israel do. They're trying to genocide the Palestinians as we speak. And this is the exact point.
So Israel...
No, but to sit here...
Hang on, so you think Israel are terrorists?
I think that what they're doing now is disproportionate and genocidal.
Is it terrorism?
It's genocidal, so I guess that makes it terrorism. It's genocidal.
So they're terrorists for responding to an act of terror, but the people who committed the act of terror are not terrorists.
The way in which they're responding...
You see the problem in that argument?
No.
Really?
Pierce, what they are doing now...
Slaughtering 1,500 people in the way they did it is not an act of terror by terrorists, but a response from the people who are on the receiving end, rather like the response of the Allies in World War II to what the Nazis did. That apparently is the only act of terrorism.
Didn't you say 12,000 people the Israelis have killed thus far?
Yes.
I saw a video of a 15-year-old girl with no legs begging to die.
Yeah.
She was begging to die saying, I have no future because my parents are gone or my legs are gone.
It's
horrific. I have
horrific.
no future. No, but you say that, right? You talk about numbers and statistics and you say a few people got caught. You don't think of Gazans and you don't think of as Muslims and Palestinians as individual people.
Oh, yes, I do.
No, you don't. Because
if
you did, you would not be happy with what's happening.
Don't you dare say that about me.
Well, okay, then don't group them together in numbers.
No,
they're not numbers, they're
I've spoken
people.
for many years about the plight of the Palestinian people. I think it's outrageous that Israel has any control over their ability to function with water, with fuel, with other energy, and so on, and food, and so on.
That's interesting.
It
so
is wrong.
If you were in Gaza as a Gazan male of masculine fighting age, and you believed the things you currently believe, what would you do about it? I'm just asking.
You know what? Nothing justifies the terrorism we saw.
I never said you'd be a terrorist. I'm asking what you do.
No. I understand why people in Palestine feel oppressed. I understand why they want freedom. I understand why they want the same rights as the people in Israel.
Then here's a perfect...
On that we agree.
Absolutely, we agree.
But nothing justifies what happened in October.
Well, here's where we disagree, Piers, because as a professional, when we both agree on the point that the people inside of Gaza are being oppressed and that their life is being detrimented and that they have no way of getting out, we, as a professional...
And I do agree with that.
I understand pressure cookers explode. You're pretending they shouldn't. You're saying that they should never explode. Nothing bad should ever happen.
saying nothing justifies terrorism.
We should just be allowed to subjugate them
No,
for
no.
endless years and nothing happens.
No.
And I'm a realist to understand that pressure cookers explode.
No, you're not.
And that's what
No,
happens.
you're not.
We need a solution to the problem, or it
Actually,
will continue to happen.
You're not a realist because actually you are not accepting that what they did on October the 7th was an act of terrorism by terrorists. You won't accept that. You think actually they're freedom fighters doing some kind of resistance. And I say that is ridiculous and shameful. That's the difference between us.
I understand that pressure cookers explode, Piers.
Right. So you think it's perfectly reasonable what happened there?
I don't think it's reasonable. I think it's a shame.
Natural consequence.
I think it's a shame.
A shame. That's it.
I think it's a shame that we're living in the world now where people are reduced to basically suicide to try and fight for freedom for their families if they have one left, because they all committed suicide. Those men who did that.
Well, the
Because
Hamas-
they didn't have a chance of survival. I think when you
Well, that's because they believe that they're martyring themselves and going to a better
when
life.
you oppress people to the point where their family's dead and they have nothing to live for.